Don't you find it frustrating, though, to know that these issues have faced them probably for a decade or more and they've been able to skirt around them? What's going to keep them from skirting around it again?
The people didn't hire me to get frustrated. They hired me to come down here and change what's needed changing for 40 years. And this ball game is not over yet.
You still have the mandate of the people?
My judgment, yes.
Are you going to go back to try and reaffirm that mandate?
Lisa, now you asked a question that it's inappropriate for me to comment on because I hadn't thought about it.
You honestly haven't thought?
I honestly haven't thought about it. And it's amazing. I read in the newspapers, my staff says this, and my good friend Joe Asbell says that, and some of your folks say this, and about where I'm going to be a candidate or not, again, ever, for anything. It didn't hire me to come down here and politic for the next office. If you'll read my campaign commitments, it didn't say a thing in the world about messing around with a future election until you're right on the eve of that election. And we are early in the third quarter. And I have every expectation of getting these reform measures through in the months ahead.
Okay, what I started to say just now was that even though we're early in the third quarter, your goals that you set out back in the first quarter, is it apparent to you or seeming to you that it may take 5 or 6 or 7 quarters instead?
Oh, no. No, that's something that professional politicians have always said to keep themselves in office, give themselves an excuse for running again. 4-year term, and I've said many times, we fought World War II in 4 years. World War and won it. And this great legislature, and you know, individually, I love every one of them, and this administration had the opportunity, and the legislature, this legislature has the opportunity of going down as the greatest legislature in the history of the state. The opportunity lies there for them. The stage is set. The issues are there. They now have the facts and figures for the first time in the history of the state. And I can't believe that in the final analysis they're not going to act on that. The lobby is notwithstanding.
Are you going to change your methods of trying to convince?
Lisa.
You have growth on one side, and you have what we might say is the ability to stand still with the existing cut-out for the growth as well.
What factors specifically next time is
Less expenditure than we would have done. And why? Another $2,300 per customer maybe. $92 million was spent for land and buildings. Over 1,600,000 telephones have been installed during this time. For a total telephone gain of over 220 spent for land and buildings, and 6% or 18 million was spent for support equipment. In doing this job, we've attempted to live up to one of our basic goals. For example, our total plan investment per customer lead telephone in 1979.
Gradick read from a rap sheet or FBI file of those inmates being considered for parole. Mostly all had prior criminal convictions. Many were convicted murderers or rapists serving life sentences. Gradick says the federal judge in most cases isn't being told about the inmates being considered for parole. He offered several suggestions to relieve the overcrowded statewide prison situation. Gradick agreed with the governor's order to build a new prison, and he likes the idea of building barracks and even setting up tents for inmates. Gradick says he'll do all he can to keep those convicted persons locked up, but he wants the public to voice its opinion about the possible mass inmate release. Gradick says the stick of dynamite hasn't gone off, the fuse has just gotten shorter. Gradick also says he's been looking at the state pardon and parole board that paroled convicted murderer Richard Mark Ellard. He didn't have a kind word to say about the board, whom he's considering filing a lawsuit against.
That board stinks. It should not be operating in the way that it operates today. It needs to be looked at and restructured, either replacing the people that we have there now or getting a new system.
The Attorney General says he's not sure when he'll file the suit. Kim Davis, WSFA, TV News.
The families who live down Woodley Road after it splits from Mount Zion Road have no running water. They have to draw water from shallow wells, which often go dry in the heat of summer, or from small pumps in their yards. Some have to haul their water from other property. Raymer resident Willie McQueen says there's a reason residents of the Pilgrim, Providence, and Teasley communities don't have water, and a reason Woodley and Gibson roads aren't paved.
It's 100% black on this road. And wherever we go where white live, they put blacktop down and put water in. What it look like to me, when they get to the black community, they run out of blacktop.
But Montgomery County Administrator Henry Sudduth says the county isn't in the water business, though sometimes it does subsidize loans so communities can form their own water authorities. He says residents of South Montgomery County haven't yet asked for that assistance. And as for paving roads, Sudduth says the new county commission hasn't set any policies regarding which roads should be paved, but that Woodley and Gibson roads aren't currently on the county's list of roads to be paved. McQueen says he hopes to have 150 South Montgomery Countyans before the commission tonight to explain that they're living in conditions McQueen compares to the 1920s. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
They get hot, they want to go swimming, so they jump overboard. And this creates a problem because they may get in trouble, and there may not be anybody close by to pick them up. So we're going to try to make sure that everyone stays on the route once they begin.
All this that we need is help from water. And why? Nearly $2,300 per customer rate in the next 5 years. Such expenditures will enable the telephone company to continue projects.
You mean to say by this that the use per customer is increasing as well? Those projections are telling you right now that you're going to have increased usage for this company through 1985.
11% on $33 million was spent for land and building, and 6% or $18 million was spent for support equipment. In doing this job, we've attempted to live up to one of
Former charges that Creel and others named in the suit told policyholders of American Public that the firm was going out of business and his company, Assured Investors, was taking over the policies. Former also charges that Creel and others named in her suit intercepted the mail of American Public and called the phone company to have that company's phone service disconnected, all designed, according to Former, to take cancer insurance policies held by state employees from American Public for Creel's company. Former further charges that Creel and Assured Investors got state officials to remove her firm's name from insurance premium payroll deduction list and replaced it with his company's name. Creel's attorney, Maury Smith, told the jury his client never took part in any wrongdoing and never authorized anyone to commit fraud or slander against Former's firm. Smith added that evidence and facts in the case will further show that Creel is not guilty of charges in the suit and the $5 million damages asked for by Former should not be paid. In fact, Smith told the jury, not a nickel or dime should be awarded to Former. Testimony is expected to continue tomorrow. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the Montgomery County Courthouse.
Siegelman says the new Business Corporations Act was designed to provide a central place for businesses to report to the state, to reserve a name and apply for incorporation. But he says the legislature didn't give his department the money to carry out its duties under the new act, which became effective in January. So now Siegelman says the Corporations Division is 4 months behind in its paperwork, which means thousands of checks attached to forms are stacked up waiting for the staff to process them. Siegelman says the new act brings in $433,000 a year, but that it would take $220,000 to pay for staff and new equipment to process the forms efficiently. The Secretary of State says some of the backlog will be relieved by staff from the governor's office who will help with annual reports, and he says it looks as though some duplication will be reduced by having his office only handle information that now goes also to the Revenue Department. But Siegelman says he may ask for a supplemental appropriation, possibly to be considered in a special session. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
I've been there about 7 months.
7 months. You were visiting professor.
It's a role in which, you know, there's many opportunities for them to work in a variety of settings within the hospital and outside. And this decade is going to be probably one where we're going to have the greatest number of changes in the health fields. And, you know, there's important reasons why that's changing, but one is because of the economic aspect. But I think the other is really that they're going to discover, the public's going to become more aware of the important role that nurses have in health care.
Residents in the Pilgrim, Providence, and Teasley communities must depend on wells and outdoor toilets because they don't have running water, and the dirt streets they live on are not at all like the paved roads in other parts of the county. The resident spokesman, Willie McQueen, explained the situation to the commission and asked the members to help the residents get running water and paved streets. Commission Chairman Mac McWhorter says the county isn't in the water business, but Commissioner Joel Barfoot volunteered to help the residents by going with them to the State Farmers Home Administration Office to find out what steps need to be taken to apply for federal aid. The FHA has a program which assists rural communities in financing the development cost of domestic water and waste disposal systems. Barfoot says the group will go to the FHA office after next Monday's commission meeting. As for the roads that need paving, City Engineer Buddy Trotter placed the names on the county list of roads which are up for paving. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Now, what about good morning. Good to see you.
It's great to see you after your call at 12:30 this morning.
I thought that he lost that much in a second.
I was in my office 5 full days last week, the first day.
Then do something else.
Just like all the retirement systems, eating swine.
I sure hope Jane won. I told Rick I thought about time he needed to go to the bathroom with him.
I appreciate it.
How you doing? Fine, thanks. Yeah, he was home.
People tell me. Just like all the retirement systems, eating swine.
I sure hope Jane won.
Our purpose was simply to secure the island against communist incursion and to secure a stable economic environment for the development of the island's natural resources, which we felt would preclude the possibility of any further communist incursions into the area. We have decided not to discuss the alleged coup which the Dominican Defense Force was to have, or is alleged to have been planning. This all will be brought out at the trial. However, we do not feel that we were in any violation of any federal law, including the Neutrality Act. And we feel that the fact that we were arrested and held on excessive bond, $500,000, and are now facing 50 years is indicative of the fact that there is some political harassment involved in all of this.
Mrs. Rawls asked the Commission to deny South Central Bell's $147 million annual rate increase request. She says a 62 to 63% increase tacked on to the consumer's monthly telephone bill is unaffordable.
The working class of people say that they can no longer afford to meet the demands that the utility companies are continually asking them to pay for these rate increases. And then the senior citizens, it's degrading to them to ask them for the only solution that they could have for those who could not afford a telephone or a basic telephone.
But South Central Bell's Alabama Vice President Carlton Baker says the increase is needed for one reason, to pay their employees adequate wages, as well as to continue to provide quality customer service.
We don't think Alabamians deserve second-class service. We don't think they'll put up with the fact that we cannot connect telephones when they want them, that we can't repair them. And it's just very, very important that we get this rate increase. We're not immune from inflation. We don't have any magic wand or magic formula that allows us to wave it and say price increases in gasoline and everything else don't affect telephone people. They do affect us.
Bell's investment official, Eugene Baker, says the telephone company needs a 15.8% return on equity capital to attract financial investors as the three commissioners continue to weigh the evidence presented in the case. Kim Davis, WSFA, TV News.
I hear that Mr. Graddick says the Department of Corrections is giving false information, that there's murderers and rapists on that list. And that is not true with the criteria that we gave to the courts.
Britton says his criteria in selecting inmates for possible release by the courts included a requirement that the inmate's current sentence be for a non-violent crime. That means a man could have been convicted of murder, served his sentence for murder, and then have been sent back to prison for another non-violent crime. That man's name could be on the list requested by a federal judge who's threatened to release state prisoners to relieve overcrowding. However, Britton adds that each inmate's criminal history was also provided the court to help in its selection of prisoners who could be freed. Britton says he still hopes no prisoners will be freed, saying that temporary housing can be built in 6 weeks to take care of 500 prisoners, though there are currently more than 1,400 state prisoners in county jails alone. But Britton says he wants to make it clear that he's not recommending anyone be released, that he supplied the list at the court's request, and Britton also wants it clear that his definition of a violent criminal and Graddick's definition use 2 different criteria. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Only 18 that I'm aware of. That was a couple of weeks ago.
The 3-year-old case is scheduled for June 18th. The Montgomery Improvement Association is suing HUD and the city for reallocating federal funds originally assigned for low-income areas to other projects, like the AUM ball field. Watkins plans to take the opposite side from the council position, and last week he asked the council to let him pick an attorney, with the city paying his legal fees. Since last week, Council President Willie Peake researched the matter and says Watkins should be responsible for acquiring his own attorney. Watkins then asked the council as a whole to make a ruling on the matter. The council voted 5-3 to deny Watkins' request. In other action, the council tabled for 1 week a resolution authorizing the mayor to apply for an urban park and recreation grant to assist in the improvements for the Fort Dixie Graves Armory. The armory will eventually become a cultural arts center. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
All of us in regular distinguished visitors.
Just a minute.
You know, Bell System was recruiting out of television line.
City, and as a result, Kansas City now will have its second pick in this first round. They had the 7th pick in the round. They took Steve Johnson from Oregon State. Let's see who they go for right now.
Okay, Kansas City is about to select.
Kansas City selects 6'5", 210 pounds, Kevin Loader, Alabama State.
I think Johnson.
Sure. It's Kansas City.
Hello? Yes. Right. Okay, I should be... Bye-bye.
What did they say?
They were going to give me a call later on about 4 o'clock today, and...
What did they say then, though? What else?
What did they say then? I gave them the number that I was going to be at, and then they're going to call me later, 4 o'clock. And then we said bye.
We're glad to have you in it?
How you doing? Huh?
Did they say anything like we're glad to have you?
Oh, congratulations. I missed that. That was the beginning. Uh-huh.
You wanted to go with a winning program, and it's a winning program, isn't it?
Correct. They have a real good organization there. They're a winning situation, the playoff team. You know, Coach Fitzsimmons is an outstanding coach, and so I'm well satisfied with what has happened. How you doing? Yeah, just got it. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Right. Uh-huh. Oh, well, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Well, you know, I haven't looked at it real close, but right, exactly.
Okay, Kansas City is about to select.
Kansas City selects 6'5", 210 pounds, Kevin Loader, Alabama State.
I think Johnson.
Sure. That's Kansas City.
Hello? Yes. Right.
You wanted to go with a winning program, and it's a winning program, isn't it?
Correct. They have a real good organization there. They're a winning situation, the playoff team. You know, Coach Fitzsimmons is an outstanding coach, and so I'm well satisfied with what has happened. How you doing? Yeah, just got it. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Right. Uh-huh. Oh, well, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Well, you know, I haven't looked at it real close, but right, exactly.
But what are we going to do about wildlife? Are we going to let it die on the vine and things of that type? But we're not letting it die. We get a new shot of blood, and I think you'll see. Bill, you'll make a comment?
Fur bearers. Apparently the program wasn't too...
Educational level that he attained. We were pleased to find one with the experience that he had attained. And we were really pleased to find one with the age that he has.
Smaller and smaller habitat as civilization spreads out from the population centers for turkey and deer, et cetera. What that looks like quite a challenge. Well,
more efficient at producing the species and protecting them.
what is habitat acquisition?
It might take the farm.
Manipulate the land. We can only operate within.
As the Chamber of the City, thank you for what you've done for Montgomery.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to thank the commission and the city of Montgomery for the support they've given ASA. We're right on target, about where we thought we'd be, with 5 flights a day.
This was the first meeting of the Joint Mental Health Oversight Committee. The legislature created the committee to oversee the spending of $65 million appropriated for capital improvement in mental health. That money comes from interest earned on the $449 million windfall the state got from leasing oil and gas exploration rights in Mobile Bay. The committee today approved $1.2 million for construction of a new kitchen for Partlow. The present kitchen was built in 1927 and doesn't meet federal standards. The committee also learned that the state is hiring staff members for the new maximum security mental hospital in Tuscaloosa. Designed to house the criminally insane, that building has been standing empty for 4 months because of lack of operating money. But Mental Health Commissioner Glenn Ireland says the governor has released some conditional funds so that hospital will open with 25 patients by October. Its capacity is 150. Meanwhile, Ireland will start searching for architects on the other capital projects, and the Oversight Committee, committed to keep interest-earning money in the general fund as long as possible, intends to examine every expense before approving it. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Dr. Willard Carlton is a business administration instructor by profession. His expertise is as a financial economics professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He's also the editor of the Finance Management magazine. Dr. Carlton is one of the 3 fiscal specialists who testified today on what Bell's rate of return on equity should be. Based on his financial analysis, Dr. Carlton concludes the telephone company's future ROE earnings should be in the 17.5% to 18.5% range. Dr. Carlton says that's a conservative range relative to a less risky alternative. PSC staff members cross-examined the finance expert for nearly 4 hours on the formula he devised in arriving at the ROE figure. Dr. Carlton has testified at several utility company hearings on ROE earnings, including the FCC hearing against AT&T. Dr. Carlton says he finds the cross-examination challenging.
And I enjoy the challenge. It's a lot of fun. It's physically wearing, but it's intellectually very stimulating.
After his testimony today, Dr. Carlton boarded a plane headed home to North Carolina. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
The plaintiff, Brenda Former, had charged that Creel's firm assured investors copied her company's policy, and agents of Creel's firm misinformed potential clients about the company American Public Life. The defense brought out that it's not illegal to copy the policies of another insurance company. State Insurance Department investigator Charles Skinner told the jury that it was common for one firm to check the files of another, even its advertising literature. Skinner also told the court that 3 of Creel's assured investor agents were suspended for their activities while selling policies to state employees. But Skinner said Creel was never charged with anything by the insurance department. Skinner added that shortly after his investigation began, Creel's company and assured investors was taken off the state insurance premium checkoff list. The jury is expected to receive the case tomorrow. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the Montgomery County Courthouse.
A055.0008 for the American record.
We're closing
Rowdy
in.
Gaines is going to shatter the
gonna-
American record.
Oh, what a finish. 133.8 in place 135. So he
has
finished
beaten
strong.
the American record by almost a second. An unreal swim for Rowdy Gaines of Auburn.
Well, he's hugging his coach. You can see the crowd is on their feet. They are happy, thrilled, beyond belief. That was just phenomenal. Folks are watching American history right here. He touches, he's looking at the clock. He knows he did a good job. 133.80 for lane 5. That's none other than Rowdy Gaines, a senior from Auburn University. And that'll help in the point standings, too. Second place went to David Larson. That's lane 4.
Good shot, man.
The Comprehensive Alcohol Program is a 9-hour course that's being conducted tonight, tomorrow night, and Friday night. The confidentiality promised to the DUI offenders by the federal government prohibits us from taking cameras into the classroom, but instructor Lynn Thomason gives us an idea of what goes on in the class.
The first night is usually the first hour is introduction to the course and tell them what the course is all about, also paperwork. And then the second hour will be the legal aspects of it, which we have usually either a police officer or a state trooper with us, and also a city attorney. And they explain to them the legal aspects of a DUI and also the civil aspects. And that's the first night. And the second night we have what we call the physical and medical aspects of a DUI.
Thomason says the program has been in effect for about 6 years. Before DUI offenders were required to attend the course, judges would sometimes suggest that offenders take the classes in exchange for a lower fine. Now that the new law requires DUI offenders to attend the seminars, Thomason says the rate of repeat DUI offenses has reduced by about 10%. The program is now beginning to include evaluation of each client to assess the drinking problem and provide counseling. Jane Matheson, WSFA, TV News.
A carefully planned budget is a necessary tool to help you spend your money wisely and to reach your family's goals. Following a budget takes determination, but it can cut out any impulse spending and give your family more for its money. After you decide what your family's goals are, whether you want to save money for education, health, comfort, or spend as you go, sit down and make out your budget. It's important to write everything down. First, add up your total income. The best budget is done for an entire year, but a monthly budget is better than nothing at all to go by. Next, list all of your fixed expenses, rent or mortgage payments, life insurance premiums, taxes, installment payments, and so on. Indicate the dates when these are due. Then add the items. You should also provide yourself with an emergency fund to meet unexpected financial needs. The last step is to estimate how much you need for day-to-day living costs, household upkeep, utilities, laundry, transportation cost, estimated clothing expenses, routine medical and dental cost, recreation, and entertainment allowances. Finally, add up all of your estimates to find your total expenditures, then subtract from your total income. If you have anything left over, it can be put into savings or used for anything else you like. Remember, it's easy to get overextended and into debt, but it's not as easy to get out of debt. Each year, millions of consumers face financial difficulties, and the way you handle them can affect your future credit rating. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
It was the Voting Rights Act that gave black people the right to vote in the southern states. And when that law was first passed, there were only like 6% of the black people were allowed to vote. And in some states now that's 60 and 70% registered voters. So it's an extremely important law that we cannot allow to lapse. There is nothing to indicate today that there are changes in the South that are going to permit black people to continue to vote. And in fact, the attack on the Voting Rights Act is a part of a national attack to disenfranchise blacks and to strengthen the position of the right wing that is now in the government power. dramatize here today that we not only want to keep also on the importance of this act this morning. Express, their concern by showing up. I hope that everybody who hears this broadcast will come out and show their concern. That is black and white. I think that we will obey the laws, and we hope that the city.
In spring 1979, Westinghouse announced its plans to build a nuclear pellet plant on this site outside Prattville. But Westinghouse says the nuclear industry has slowed down, eliminating any immediate need for the plant. Plant manager Frank Sellier says a similar facility in Columbia, South Carolina has been modified to handle any increased need for nuclear fuel in the immediate future. Had the Prattville plant been completed, an estimated 400 new jobs would have been created. But Prattville Mayor Gray Price, himself an avid supporter of the proposed plant, says the cancellation won't hurt the city's future.
I am concerned about it, and I'm upset, as I said, but it's not devastating, and I think we'll pull out of it all right.
Westinghouse blames the Carter administration for slowing down the licensing of new nuclear reactors, reflected in this graph showing the number of plants licensed each year.
Because the plant was delayed, it didn't go on stream, and therefore it didn't burn fuel and doesn't need to be refueled. And this is the only reason that we are not going ahead with those plans.
The Safe Energy Alliance of Central Alabama, an anti-nuclear group represented by Attorney Julian McPhillips, claims its opposition played a major role in the Westinghouse decision, but Sellier says that's not so. In fact, he says if the nuclear industry picks up, Prattville would be one of the first sites to be considered. Dave Rickey, WSFA TV News.
Commission President Billy Joe Camp asked that the $33 million be dropped from the request because he says the money represents an increase in depreciation rates, an increase that hasn't yet been approved. Camp pointed out that every 3 years the Commission and South Central Bell hold meetings with the Federal Communications Commission to determine what the utilities' depreciation rates will be, but the next meeting won't be until September. So he says South Central Bell is basing its request on tentative figures.
These costs that we are incurring are real costs, and they are a legitimate expense. We appreciate what the chairman has said, but in view of the magnitude of the costs that we are incurring, we respectfully cannot comply with that request. I do not see and do not feel that this commission can realistically say to the public that we have considered the facts and that rates based on this portion of this request can be fair and reasonable when we in fact do not know the facts in the case and will not know them until after the three-way meeting.
Commissioners could have voted to exclude the $33 million, but Camp says the phone company might have gone to court to try and collect the money. So the rate hearing continues on the request for the entire $146 million. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
And again, we get to plug in about we're making the deal for some help. We've gotten a story from one witness that says that a lady came in to get water for her car, ran hot, and the child came up missing immediately after she left. Well, naturally, we're trying to run that story down. We don't know yet if the child was abducted or not. Of course, we're going to treat it just like the child has been kidnapped. That's the only choice we have. We did a door-to-door.
Of course, we were upset and disappointed about the situation the Westinghouse is going to pull out. But since they never had located at all and had not employed any people at all, I don't think it's going to have that big an impact. We are disappointed, but I think we can recover from it and find some more industry. We're out, got Chamber of Commerce and the Industrial Development Board. Both of them are hard-working groups, and they're starting today looking for some new industry for our area. So I am concerned about it, and I'm upset, as I said, but it's not devastating, and I think we'll pull out of it all right, and I think we'll be all right on it.
I mean, I don't know, Roy.
We're standing lots of money out here. And lots of tragedy. And doesn't seem to be any end to it. So the answer is just to persevere and keep on getting after it, and that's what you've done, and I thank you.
Where's the coffee?
Already been cut. This one's not old at all. Skid ain't even caught on yet and got the water up.
Yep. At Burrington. It's the longest month of my life. You did what? It's the longest month of my life.
I want to say, you know, is that the release of prisoners, the Attorney General is saying the kinds of statements that he is without, and have shown that they can do it and they're doing fine, but an unsupervised, those are the people that could be moved onto parole and under a supervised parole situation, than the people in 1,000 openings in the prison system, which, you know, we've got all those state prisoners in the county jails.
No one would be free. Everybody would have the obligation of serving their sentence. And even those people with unsupervised parole, the court would still have authority over them, the parole board would still have authority over them. So that, in a sense, nobody's really unsupervised.
The group has submitted its plan to Federal District Judge Robert Varner, who has threatened to release prisoners outright if the state won't solve overcrowding problems. But Alabama Prison Project says those prisoners needn't be released without supervision, that some prisoners now on parole can be put on unsupervised parole. Then about 1,000 inmates in work release programs could go on parole, leaving space in work release for those now in prison. Project leaders say the only prisoners who would be on the streets are those who would be paroled in 18 months anyway. And they claim the plan is better than the administration's plan to erect temporary housing for inmates at a cost of more than $1 million. Project spokesman criticized the emotional and political reactions to the state's prison problems and called for a more thoughtful response to protect taxpayers as well as those inmates the project feels are prepared to be released. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Outside the federal courthouse, about 50 people held what they called a people's hearing on the Voting Rights Act proposed extension. It was out here in the searing heat of the day that supporters of the proposed extension made emotional pleas.
Our survival is not debatable. The right to vote is paramount to our survival. We're not debating this. We won't go back on this. So we're saying to them, you do what you want, Mr. Congressman, and we will do what we must, but we won't go back.
The rally was limited to the steps of the federal courthouse because the group didn't act early enough to ask the city council for a parade permit. Anticipating a crowd, the Montgomery Police Department made a formidable show to ensure that the rally didn't spill over into the streets, and this included strategically located police officers. But there was little need for the police as the small group, although enthusiastic, remained calm. Of the 50 or so people at the outside rally, about a dozen were speakers representing a number of organizations, and nearly 24 others were members of the press.
Organizers of the People's Hearing say there are several reasons there was not a large crowd. One was the heat. The second was that it was a working day and many people couldn't get away from their jobs. A third reason, several busloads of supporters from Mississippi either didn't make it or are still on their way. Either way, the organizers feel the enthusiasm was good enough and they feel satisfied. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Federal Courthouse.
Single difficulty in voting other than long lines was brought to my attention. Alabama has two. Numerous blacks have been elected to the Alabama legislature where their influence is strong. As a matter of fact, in the Alabama Senate, blacks are chairman of the two most powerful committees of this great country with the same guarantees at the bar of justice as any other American. Go.
They came to the city council too late to be placed. Mobile indicated a figure of some 450,000. The American Almanac proof should shift. If we do something wrong,
well, sir, in an ideal situation, I think you're quite right, but this is as though you're dealing with an idea. California is covered in part by the Voting Rights Act, so in the Voting Rights Act, there are some examples that subcommittee have not had explained to them of what is going on, that people are down here to seek responses and
The committee, Hyde of Illinois, Edwards of California, and Washington of Illinois, conducted the hearings on the second floor of the federal building. The key issue was whether the plea clearance section of the act should be extended. The section requires that any changes in election procedures must be reported to the Justice Department. Mayor Farmer was the only person opposing the extension, citing several reasons. One, he said, was red tape involved in reporting every change to Washington.
I cannot believe that it serves any useful purpose for the city of Montgomery to have to go to Washington, hat in hand, to beg for permission to change the location of voting places, or to get permission to redistrict, or to annex additional citizens.
Farmer added political advances made by blacks in the state are proof that the act should not be renewed. But Councilman Joe Reed of Montgomery countered everything Farmer said and cited what he called examples of voting rights violations, which ended up in federal court for resolution recently. Reed said, extend the act.
we're going to try to get rid of some blacks in the legislature this time around. This is why the pre-clearance section is so important. Nowhere has the need of the Voting Rights Act been more evident than the state of Alabama. Those of you on the committee who participate in the passage of this act, your contribution to making America live up to its true creed.
Other witnesses supporting extension were Secretary of State Don Siegelman, Birmingham Mayor Richard Arrington, and League of Women Voters State Director Ann Shores. Black politicians from across Alabama echoed these sentiments and urged the committee to extend the act, or blacks will lose gains made since 1965. The second floor courtroom where these hearings were held today held special significance for some of those who attended. It is a former courtroom of Judge Frank Johnson, Jr., the judge who rendered so many civil rights decisions, which as a result made it possible for many blacks to become elected officials here in the state of Alabama. The results of these hearings will not be known for several months. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the Federal Court.
We're standing lots of money.
Already been cut. This one's not old at all. It ain't even caught on yet and got the water up.
Yep. At Burrington. It's the longest month of my life. You did what? It's the longest month of my life.
My grandmother, Adeline Moses, had great affection for Montgomery, where she grew up and where she was born. And that's why I've come with this exhibit, which I originally initiated several years ago, about early Jewish life and culture in America, and in particular in the South.
Well, I'd say the plaintiffs, American Public Life Insurance Company and Brenda Fulmer, have been vindicated by the judgment of this court and the jury's verdict of $1.3 million. I'd say also the policyholders that had fraud and slander committed on them have also been redeemed by this judgment. And I think a message has been sent to people in Alabama and other southern states not to come into Alabama and not to misrepresent about an insurance company and tell them that they've been bought out or taken over, absorbed, or that they've gone out of business or any other type of fraud like this.
Aware of how that commission treated the cost of...
Yes, in those, and it varies somewhat between states, but essentially the same type of problem which results from accepting interest in this area. Now, what will come with this, I have no idea. I just thought of the application. For example, if you this particular
The Alabama River looked like a modern-day Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn adventure. The rafts were decorated in various ways. Many rafts had Confederate flags, and the fancier vessels were topped with canopies to keep the sun off the voyagers. Almost anything that floated was entered in the contest, and the rafts were categorized in 5 classes, which distinguished between the propelled, sophisticated crafts and the simpler floats like inner tubes. All motorized vessels were prohibited. The winning raft, constructed by placing a plywood board over 3 canoes, finished the 6-mile course in 1 hour, 25 minutes.
What did it take to win?
Oh, it took paddling hard and drinking a lot of Strohs.
And a female captain.
And a lady captain. That's what took it.
Most of the floaters weren't as competitive, and many stayed on the river until mid-afternoon. The Montgomery Police Department and Alabama Marine Police were also out on the river in full force to handle any emergency. The Marine Police say there were no actual injuries, just some minor accidents like rafts getting jammed together. Jane Matheson, WSFA, TV News.
It's taken researchers 3 years to develop a breeding program that'll produce a variety of tomatoes. What they've come up with are tomatoes that are ready for market 10 to 15 days ahead of schedule and plants that'll produce 6 to 8 fruits per cluster. Also through their experimentation, researchers have developed drought and heat-resistant tomatoes, which will come in handy since the traditional drought season officially begins today. Researchers say the experiment was conducted to teach Alabama farmers how to improve their tomato crops in the commercial industry. Chief researcher Dr. Bobby Phil says Alabama currently produces 1/3 of the total tomato consumption, whereas the new experiments show Alabama farmers could be producing half the tomatoes consumed in the state. Dr. Phil says the tomato crops have been earning about $7 million, but now the crops could double its earnings. Dr. Phil talks about the 3-year experiments with the red fruit.
We feel that this particular breeding program addresses itself primarily to the earliness in tomato production, thereby developing varieties that would mature much earlier. When we say much earlier, we're talking roughly 10 to 15 days earlier than what's traditionally done now. This would mean that instead of beginning to sell tomatoes in the state of Alabama from mid-May through June, we could start in the beginning of May in the southern parts of Alabama and possibly in mid-June in the extreme northern parts of Alabama.
Farmers and home growers got a chance to ask questions about improving their tomatoes. Dr. Phil's advised growers what not to do. Don't water your plants while smoking or late at night. Dr. Phil says the plants can contract a tobacco mosaic virus. He says water the plants at a time when they can dry out easily, like in the morning. Dr. Phil says don't plant the tomatoes directly in the fertilizer, but do get a soil test before planting. And Dr. Phil says it's okay to plant tomatoes in full sunlight, although it won't hurt the plant if it's planted in the shade. With that advice, Dr. Phil says your tomatoes should be better than they ever were before. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News, Tuskegee. When city, county, state, and federal law enforcement officers, along with their wives, convene for the 3-day annual conference, money will be on the minds of most officials.
Low salaries of police officers in the state will come up, shortage of personnel, of course, of our lack of federal funding through our LEPA grants, and possibly the release of prisoners because of crowded jails and throughout the state will be some of the topics of this conference.
There are about 4,000 law enforcement officials who belong to the Alabama Peace Officers Association. The organization is the oldest law enforcement association in the state. During the conference, officers will get a chance to hear special guests, former Governor George C. Wallace, State Attorney General Charles Braddock, and local law enforcement officials, Police Chief Charles Swindle and Sheriff Maxim Butler. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.